everyone, and welcome to today's Beyond the Rainbow panel about lesbian archives. I want to first off start off by saying Happy Lesbian Visibility Week. We've had an incredible week here at the Curve Foundation, and we're excited that you're joining us. This conversation is part of the Curve Foundation's Beyond the Rainbow speaker series, which seeks to create an intersectional, multi-generational space touching on gender, queerness, race, ability, and activism of today and yesterday. The Curve Foundation is the only national nonprofit dedicated to championing LGBTQ+ women and non-binary people's culture and stories. If you get a chance, we'd love your support. Please donate to the Curve Foundation to help us continue our groundbreaking and vital work. All donations are tax deductible and can be made online at thecurvefoundation.org. I'd like to invite each one of the panelists to start by introducing themselves and tell us very quickly about your archive work or your organization. So, Erin, you're at the top of my screen, so if it's okay, we're going to start with you.
Sure, can do. Hey everyone, my name is Erin Bell. I am the operations director at the Gerberhardt Library and Archives. We are the largest independent LGBTQ library and archives in the Midwestern United States. We have been collecting LGBTQ history and culture from Chicago, Illinois, and the broader Midwest since 1981. And we are really, really excited to be part of this panel today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to move down to Olivia.
Hi, my name is Olivia. I am one of the coordinators at the Lesbian History Archives. I'm sure Joan can talk more about the archives, but I'll talk about the work that I do there. I work with the special collections. Special collections are non-circulating, unpublished materials, so like correspondence and drafts. And I'm particularly interested in amplifying and spreading light to multiply marginalized lesbians within our collections.
Thank you. Amanda?
Hello, my name is Amanda Cervantes. I am a Chicago-based artist, curator, and writer. I've primarily worked with the Gerberhardt Library to access their collection and to make artwork in response to some of their archival materials. Recently, I did a project using their Amigas Latinas collection for a project titled Amigas Latinas Forever.
Thank you. Angela?
My name is Angela Brinskelly. I'm with the June L. Mazer Lesbian Archives. I'm their communications director. I've been with them about 17 years, and we've been around since 1981, where we were founded in Oakland and called the West Coast Lesbian Collections.
Thank you so much. And Joan?
Hi, I'm Joan Nessel, and I was one of the co-founders, and that co-word is very important, of the Lesbian History Archives in 1974. It's our 50th anniversary. I have to say, it's Olivia who is really the archives now. I've been living in Australia, so I haven't been physically there, though this is such a momentous, I'm feeling, gathering. And where we go from here is all in everyone's hands.
Very good. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you to everyone in the gallery. We're going to start off with some questions, and then time permitting, we're going to have the audience ask some questions. So please pop those in the chat when they come up so that we can have a look at them at the end when we have some time to answer those questions. So my first question is for everyone in the gallery, for everyone on the panel. And it's, why do you think archives are important, and how do they increase the visibility and representation of diverse voices in our community? Who wants to kick that off? All right, let's start with Joan.
Okay, well, I always do. I go to our first LHA newsletters in preparation for this, and I realized it was already 1976, in our third newsletter, there was a statement, a loss, Lavender Women, last issue, July 1976. So as early as that, our creations were already being lost to us. And what all our archives have to do now is make sure that the voices of new times are treasured, are sought out in as many languages as we can, and in as many, can I say, we know that across America, I'll say, that lesbian voices, as well as others, are being banished in ways we thought we never see again. And so our archives has to be a refuge for the unwanted. And we who have any shaping power have to make sure we never create new exiles while we think we're saving histories. Every question you ask, Franco, is so huge in implications. That
I was saying we could have a panel about each one of the topics that we're going to touch on today. So maybe there'll be a part 2. We're not sure. I'd like to get some input on that from one of the other panelists. Should I just call on one of you? I'm happy to call on Amanda.
So, the main thing that I think about with this question is that, like, point blank, archives are meant to represent that we were here and that it's documented. That everything that we, like the collective way that these collections that we acquire, these groups that donate their work to these various archives, these artists, these writers, prove that they were here, that they did the work, and that it could be shared. That these archives exist for folks like me, who is not an archivist, but is an artist who is interested in these things, who can learn and discover new things and learn about new organizations, people, and like start to kind of connect the dots and build like a network almost.
Thank you. That's really insightful. Yeah, Angela.
Yeah, I always like to talk about the founding of our archive. We were founded in Oakland in 1981, and the policy was to collect anything a lesbian ever touched. And at first I thought that's kind of extreme, right? But then I thought, oh my God, Gertrude Stein and other lesbians were in these places almost 100 years before these women who started this archive. And they could not find any lesbian history anywhere around them. So they started this archive because there was a need. And if they hadn't done that, a lot of this history that represents so many women's lives, lesbians' lives, feminists' lives, would have been lost. And people could say it didn't exist. It's kind of like Gloria Steinem talks about, if there was no history of women getting the right to vote, they would say we were given the right to vote. There would be maybe no history of the battles fighting for those rights otherwise. And by the same token, lesbians are so used to their history being made to disappear. And that's why this is so important, that, as Amanda said, kind of to prove that we were here and we did this work and we are these people,
Erin, do you have something to follow up on that?
Yeah, I completely agree with everything that people have said before me, that it is all about creating a space where these stories can be, like, the actual physical materials can be protected and accessible. you know, even though we live in a very digital time and things are being digitized, there's always reasons why things aren't digitized, or people who aren't able to access things digitally. And so having the actual space, a physical place where people can come to look at the physical materials and to handle them, and to, you know, see everything from the actual content itself to the way that the items were carefully put together. And then from that, in archives, it's not just the actual materials that are being preserved, it's the space within where those materials live. And I can speak for Gerber Hart. It's something that we take really seriously, that we want to make sure this space feels comfortable for everyone. And in doing so, in trying to make it a comfortable space, a place where people feel like they can be themselves and they can explore the history that they want to explore, that brings in the whole community and makes people feel like that this is their space, and that they can add to it, or they can at least use the materials. Yeah, it's just something that's really important.
That's great. I was going to ask Olivia the same question, but I want to ask you something different, Olivia. So it seems like, having just been in New York myself, the Lesbian Herstory Archives in Brooklyn seems to have this resurgence of excitement around it. There's almost this, like, I don't want to say cult following, but it's got this buzz to it that I don't remember having back when I was sort of, you know, a younger queer person. Are you seeing that there, or is it just my perception?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm going to answer it in two parts. I think the first part about how I'm going to answer this buzz around the archives is related to the point of LHA. I feel like archives, or community archives, are points of resistance, right? Because when you're thinking about archiving has never been some kind of neutral action. Archives have always been points of power, negotiated power within the records themselves, within the people who donate them and the researchers, right? There's all these points of contact. There's all these power dynamics that we are all engaging in, which are really, really important to recognize, especially archives' colonial point, right? Like the point of archives were to justify colonial histories, right? And so if we are going to be a community archive and we are interested in archiving our own community, the point of our archives are that they are intentional disruptions of the traditional history that are archives, right? Like our goal as like LHA is not to just reproduce normative archiving traditions. Our goal isn't just to like be an archive and we're all gay and suddenly that's better. Like that is a pale reproduction. That is just reproducing the problems with archives, right? LHA is an intentional disruption. And I think that leads to a resurgence. I wouldn't say it's a resurgence. It's difficult because I'm younger and I can't really think about I can't speak to whether or not there's more attention to it. I think perhaps there's a lot more archival literacy that people are having because of the work of community archivists, because of community archives, and because of our activists and cultural workers who understand that there is power in knowing our own history and there is power in knowing ourselves, right? Archives are history making places where people can find themselves, right? And I feel like young people, especially young lesbians and young dykes out there, are really interested in learning how our ancestors have resisted. And you can find resistance at LHA. And I feel like that resurgence is because young people have a certain type of, I wouldn't say it's more, but there's an interest in some kind of collective political consciousness that they're finding within the archives. That's what people are asking for when I'm hosting researchers or giving tours.
Thank you. That's really insightful. And it kind of leads me perfectly into my next question, which is a question I want to address to Erin, Joan, and Angela. So when I started Curve Magazine, it was very much a grassroots effort. I know that a lot of you getting your projects off the ground, Erin, you might have you're a little bit younger, so you probably have a little bit of different perspective, but Let's talk a little bit, and feel free to tell a story about how archives are grassroots, and also how they're community hubs, they're fostering connections and providing spaces for sharing stories, experiences, and the memories that we hold so dear. And archiving our current and our past is so important, because if you're not seen, if you're not heard, it's like you don't even exist. So, Angela, do you want to start off with that question?
Um, can you repeat the question? I know you asked, I know the question, but can you repeat the question
So-
one more time?
Of course. So you can either talk a little bit about the grassroots nature of June L. Mazer Lesbian
Oh,
Lesbian
that's
Archives.
good. I'll start there.
Okay, thanks.
Because one of the things I love to tell students is that we're a grassroots archive, and I always say, does anybody know what that means? And usually no one does. And one of the things I tell them is that means that somebody in this community felt a need for this. They thought it was necessary, and so they started it. And I can look around a classroom and see which students by their eyes are thinking, I could start that. I could start something like that in my community. And so we love to give that information to students and young people, especially, so they know this is grassroots. It was started by people in the community who felt a need for this organization. And that's really important. And then maybe I'll come back after other people talk.
Okay. I would like to hear from Joan as to what it was like back when you were, you first had this idea and you were starting out. Tell us a story of like kind of this light going off in your collective brains about like, this is something we should do, and how it's materialized today into what it currently is.
Okay, but I have to go back even further. There's so much I want to say, because I think the need to remember has different starting places in maybe all of us. And for me, having come out in the Butch Femme bars in the late 1950s, I'd never been in an archives in my life. I really still haven't been one, except LHA, I think. It was about a community of women, queers, because we were queers then, who were who are not wanted even by the new movement of lesbian feminism. Each of us, I'm saying, has a place. There are exiles that touch each of us in different ways. I have given my life 80, not since I was a baby, but really in homage to those working class, butch femme, passing women, sex workers of that bar. And when we came together, 7 of us came together, we were active with the Gay Academic Union. The thing I want to say is these were collective histories in a time. Remember, there's been the civil rights movement. There's been the anti-war movement. There's been, for me, the anti-McCarthy period. It has always been said in political closing down of the heart and mind. And all I knew was I had to do something where butch femme women wouldn't be despised or dismissed because of class, because of outright sexualities and things. So when we met, very different, Deb Adel, who was a lesbian feminist, Julia Stanley, who was a bar woman who turns into a radical lesbian separatist, Pamela Oline, who was a political lesbian, that's a whole, we were different. We were like a delta, the river, delta of a river, where all the different earths of surrounding country come together. And the thing, and I would just will say, well, I think there's always been a buzz around the Lesbian History Archives. So I want to say something else. Anyway, we realized we had to do this collectively and it's working together, combining what each one has and finding out there's so much you have to give. But I also want to say the archives, even from the beginning, we made this we had this insight, we would not be a role model archives. And I want to say that right now. We wanted to collect the complexity of lesbian and lives in as a hugeness of that definition as possible. So for me, one story, one of the most profound moments was when a group of women arrived, with 3 older women, and they were carrying boxes and they were coming down from Provincetown. And I was there to receive them. It was a special collection, Olivia said, and it was, and they said, look, you probably don't want this collection. And I say, why not? Why not? Why? Well, the woman was an FBI informant, a lesbian woman who worked for the McCarthy haters, really. And I said, no, we must have that collection. We must have that collection. We must show that lesbians are as complex as they are, because we can't sanitize our histories if we truly are going to serve or be there for a future that we have no idea how complex it will be. So I've thrown a lot in there because a lot is going on, but yes, collectivity. None of our work here could be done without collective meetings, endless meetings for us, over 50 years of meetings that are still going on, in Zoom meetings that blow your head. And a sharing of resources, that's something else, because we know in a class-riddled society, some of us have more than others. And what the archives did was give a place where we could all bring whatever kind of wealth we had. So for me, it was an apartment that could be shared. We could tithe. So it's, when you do talk to younger people, this is a whole different world to them. And people say, well, where did you get the money? We never, the first thing wasn't to ask for a grant. The first thing was to say, the woman who made love to me in a police surveilled bar has died, and I have no place to mark her touch. It was, where can a body that's despised, sometimes within our own communities, because butch femme women were not really welcomed in the early days of lesbian feminism. And thank God for that difference of us. And that's what our collectors must be filled with difference. And we have ways to go in making that happen. And it must be filled with different languages as well.
I just want to take a second and inhale that. And I could sit with this panel for a really long time, and I'll be thinking about what you said for definitely the rest of the night, if not longer. Erin, I want to, ask you whether you want to answer that same question, or do you want to talk about Gerber Hart as like a community space?
I would love to talk about Gerber Hart as a community space, and just how we are, I mean, same as what Angela and Joan have been saying, that we started out of a need and a necessity, and it was the actually the Chicago chapter of the Gay Academic Union that saw that need and that vacancy, and how there weren't LGBTQ collections at all the neighboring universities and colleges in Chicago and the Midwest, and how we, as we've had with many other industries and organizations, we have to make it for ourselves. And from the very beginning, Gerber Hart has been, we've relied on the kindness of our neighbors and people being able to let us have a space in their basement to begin collecting, materials from people who have stories to tell, people's, personal diaries and papers that they wanted to have preserved and accessible to future generations. And to know that and to be able to share that tidbit of information with every new volunteer orientation I bring through. I just had one earlier today, four more volunteers working with Gerber Hart now. and with every class that comes through. And we have college classes and we have high school classes who come through. And it's just always such a privilege and a joy for a very introverted person to be able to talk to them and share my own enthusiasm for what brought me into the archives as a volunteer many years ago. And just to be able to share with them, just as you say, Joan, the materials that are from a different world and a different time. And to be able to say that you can come here and you can look at these materials and you can use them for artwork like Amanda did. And you can use them for your own personal educational pursuits, and also to have it serve as a reminder that we have collections at Gerber Hart that are of some of those well-known big names, people that were really big in the specifically in the Chicago queer community, but we serve the whole community. And if you want to have your papers as a queer person accessible to others, Gerber Hart can offer that space. We can offer the, cold storage, and we can offer the time of the volunteers to make those materials accessible. One thing I wanted to mention is that we've been able to get a new room as part of our current space in Chicago, and we are calling it the community room because we want to be able to bring back book clubs again. We haven't had a book club for quite a long time. We want to give a space that other organizations in the community can use freely to have meetings. We want to be able to give as much as we can back to the community that welcomed us when we started all those years ago, and just, continue to serve the community as librarians and archivists do.
Can I just add something?
Of course. Yes.
This is one of the most basic and maybe profound reasons why we exist. Before our archives, there was no place to mourn the loss of a lover in a setting that would honor that life. And a profound example, so when Miss Mabel Hampton died, who was sort of the reason the archives exist in my head is to commemorate the life of someone as Miss Mabel Hampton. She was known to thousands. They would come. She was always at our work group on Thursday night, and women would come from all over. They'd come to New York just to be there for her night. When she died, the New York Times, yes, they got an obituary, but the last sentence in that obituary was, "There are no known survivors." Do you know how many lesbians have been their lives summarized? And we had done so much work, we thought. We had done to change that, to erase that erasure, and we hadn't. We still had. So think of it from the very beginning, when it may have started. I'm looking at your bookcases behind you. It was about touching places of the heart that had been so lacerated by social and political and every religious judgments of us as less than human. And now our challenge is to be as fully inclusive human as we can be. And yes, I celebrate Lesbian Visibility Week, but I do not, for me, I don't believe we're invisible. I've never seen so many lesbians in public life anywhere. I think for me, that's buying into a little bit about this. There's not enough territory to go around. We will not be replaced. It makes me uncomfortable. I'll just say that right out in a way. It's what we do. As Olivia said, we have power. We can't act anymore as if we're just victims. We are not. We get more funding in some ways, or we have more things that other groups have. It's how we use now what we have. And I'm going to introduce something, and it's we're archiving in a time of war. We're archiving in a time of occupation. These are controversial issues. it is necessary for the archives to include in our collections the lives and voices of lesbians and queer women and queer people who are risking their lives to end occupations. So are we controversial? Yes. And how can I say, okay, I better stop. Controversial but inclusive in our differences. But we are part of the world now. And if
Thank
Trump gets reelected in your country, all our archives are endangered.
Let's all take a collective breath. And I want to focus on next asking Amanda and Olivia some things about how archives have helped you in your education, in the work that you do. Olivia, you're obviously very entrenched in LHA. Amanda, why don't you tell us a little bit about, touch on a little bit deeper about how the archives have helped you in your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as part of my artistic practice, I often look to the past to reference the present. It's been a theme in my work ever since I was an undergrad when I started working with my collaborator, and he was the person in general who introduced me to the concept of using an historical archive to talk about something personal. For example, he was looked into an archive when he was making a film about his mom who was institutionalized in the 70s in Chicago for being a young queer woman. And that was his master's thesis. It was so he had looked for the archives of the Chicago Read mental health facility. And I didn't realize that could be something that you could do, was to look at archives as a means to contextualize something that you're trying to communicate. So when we started working with Gerber Hart and started working with the Amigas Latinas archive specifically, something that was really amazing to me was to find I had no idea that the Amigas Latinas organization even existed. To kind of sum up, they were an organization serving Latina lesbians, bisexual, transgender women in Chicago, starting from 1995 to 2015. And they were an advocacy group. They grew to be a full nonprofit, and they were by the end, they had little offshoot groups. They had a group for youth called Amiguitas. They had like they had grown so much. They were giving scholarships to students. They had they did so many amazing things, and their archive was given to Gerber Hart, which is how I was able to see it and was able to look at it. And for what we were doing for Amigas Latinas Forever, we wanted to share with because I had no idea that this archive existed, or this collection existed. I wanted to share it with other folks and to share it with people of my generation, and also younger folks, and to also honor them, the founders, the members who had created this organization in the first place. So a story that something that we kind of identified first was were these flyers that they kept in binders for for their programs called Pláticas, which were these talks that they held in members' homes. And it ranged from different topics, like anything from, just how to come out to your kids, immigration, race and class amongst Latinos and how Latinas, and how that kind of sitting down and talking about intersectionality, and kind of having these hard conversations. They had uh, like family, they had a lot of family friendly events. A lot of their members were parents. So there were a lot of events for kids. They had picnics, they had all sorts of things. And these flyers were mailed to community members' homes. So the only people who saw them were members within the Amigas Latinas organization. So what we did was we scanned them, we scanned a lot of them, and we redacted like identifying information like their phone numbers, their addresses. Because something that I loved about the flyers was that they created a physical social network. It was these there was like just a network of people who were like connected through the mail. They would show up at these events, and there was a lot of care. There was a lot of really beautiful language. There was like it was made with these like there were all of these beautiful bright colors, um, like a lot of clip art. It was just like I loved them. I thought they were amazing as objects, as artifacts, and I wanted to kind of showcase these objects, these flyers, and the labor that went into making them and mailing them. There were hundreds of them, and so we scanned them and then reprinted them with a risograph printer, and we made a wall of flyers as a way for like and I don't know if I can do this. Can I share an image of that? I have it pulled up. I don't know if I should have asked previously, but
Yeah, I don't think we can, since it's not previously set up, I don't know that we can share that at this point.
that's
Um,
okay. But yeah, anyway, that's what we made. It was this giant wall that we put on the gallery. It was like uh it was really, really huge, and it was meant as kind of just like to showcase this work and to showcase this like kind of like the labor that went into creating these, and for folks to see like what they did, frankly, just like what they made, like how they built this like how they built these programs. And it was something that was amazing to see like as a queer person to kind of like see this network that was created like long before like social media, that how these people connected and like had a how common ground. So that's my story with the Amicus Latinas archive.
Thank you. Yeah, a few of us here remember the time before the internet. But before we jump into something else, Olivia, I wanted to ask you the same question.
About
The
how I use
question
archives.
was, no, the question that I had asked was, I know you're more involved with the archive specifically. Why don't you tell us about either how it's helped you in your education or a special project that you're working on now?
Oh, okay, that's fun. It's interesting because I'm very privileged in the sense where I live a very lesbian life. All my friends are lesbians. I live in Park Slope, Dyke Slope. I work at a historically women's college. I volunteer at LHA. It's I feel like it's really hard to separate out what the archives has done for me because it's given me everything that I have currently. I have a lot of gratitude and like constant like warmth that I have to the archives, whether we're fighting over Zoom, like Joan mentioned, or on email, or I'm like, someone sent me their special collection and they didn't waterproof the package and it's out on the porch and I don't know if I'm gonna get there in time, whether I'm fighting with don't, it doesn't matter. I love the archives. It's done everything for me. So that's like the simplest answer. I would say special project that I'm working on. We don't have a lot of public facing description for a lot of our special collections. So the other special collections coordinators and I have been working within our OPAC, which is like an open catalog essentially, to have public facing. I don't know if I mentioned it in a meeting yet, Joan, but we're working in Presto to have like a public facing finding aid. So we can have finding aids for all of our collections, which can be online. And we have interns this summer that are doing a lot of redescription and utilizing like local subject headings and stuff. So soon, sometime in the nearest future, we will have public facing finding aids for all of the special collections at LHA. Yeah.
Thank you. Before we go on, Angela, you had mentioned that you wanted to say something about the question that Amanda was asking.
Well, I just think one of the things I like to talk about regarding education and the archives is people can come to the archives, and I think I loved what Olivia just said, actually. People can come to the archives and learn to be politically active and learn to be a political activist in a really intricate way, in a really detailed way, because, you know, we have the history of the feminist movement that was informed by the civil rights movement. I mean, these are no small deals, right? So one of the examples was in California, I call it the free period, when we were able to get married from summer to November. And then in November, we had an election, and suddenly my friends all legally married, and now I can't, because they voted no on gay marriage. And so many young people didn't believe that was possible until it actually happened. And a lot of them kind of flooded the archives, and it was a really smart place to come, because we have things like the Briggs Walking Packet. The Briggs Initiative was a huge threat in California to LGBTQ people, and threatened to fire all teachers all over the state of California and any of their supporters if they were gay. And the Briggs Walking Packet is a phenomenal thing, just one out of thousands and thousands of things in our subject files that shows you how to walk a precinct and how to canvass a neighborhood and how to talk to people to change their vote. And I don't know where else I would ever go to see something like that. I'm sure there are other places, but the amount of education you can get to be something like an activist in the archives is really incredible. And I also think, just as a secondary thing, I also think it's a really big self-esteem builder, because I'm one of those people who think no matter how weird you think you are, somebody has come before you that's like you. And I think one of the things about the archives that I find often is people show up and they're shocked that they feel at home, or they found somebody who seems just like them, and they didn't believe they existed before they came in, you know? And that's, you know, you can't just get self-esteem everywhere. You can't just be empowered everywhere, as we know, and especially women in a sexist world, you know? So these are really important places.
I love that. Thank you for mentioning that. We're getting near our time for closing, so I want to throw out some of the, I know, went so incredibly fast. I didn't even get to my last question, but I want to give you all a second to, actually, you know what? I will ask one more question. Why is authentic representation significant, and what challenges are involved in combating erasure and stereotypes?
Okay, I'll just start. First of all, I'm not sure what authentic means, but I think perhaps memory in a setting that is controlled by the unwanted. Okay, so we are also different, and it's this is the challenge, is not to solidify in defense. And we are, you know, but I'm just so, I've been seeing the chat come in, and yes, it's that I'll just LHA, but I'm sure that the regions of the country are all over the archives in terms of every newsletter that ever came out. But I also want to say, what you're seeing here, some of us were at the beginning, still going. There's been a movement, an international movement of lesbian, gay, and queer archiving. So people who are listening to this are showing, but we do this, and yes, and this is not meant not to have recognition of any of, we all need each other, and we need each other internationally. We must not forget internationally. I'm not sure I answered what you said, Franco.
That's okay. It's always a
Okay.
delight. Did anyone want to answer that question? Olivia?
Yeah, I can answer that question. I would say part of how we like resist like unauthentic representation is to resist our desires to, like as Joan said, spoke about briefly, to homogenize. I feel like as oppressed people, there's this idea that it comes up all the time that we have to kind of sanitize some of our people in our community that are on the outskirts. Joan has mentioned it many, many times in this conversation, but talking about Butch Femme and the lesbian feminists pushing them out, or the separatists, or like leather people and SM and removing them. Or maybe there is some desire for respectability within our communities because we are so afraid of what our oppressors will think about us. And I would say the way to resist unauthentic representation is to make sure we are not sanitizing our own histories out of fear, right? And so I think that kind of ties into what Joan mentioned earlier about collecting materials that make people uncomfortable, right? Certain ways you can have even like tacit conversations, right? Or with our collections. So for example, like perhaps I know at LHA and with me and the special collections people, we are doing a lot of direct outreach to anti-war lesbians, to Palestinian lesbians, to queer Arab lesbians, to Jewish lesbians who are doing the work to support Palestinian liberation, because that is something that we know is important and that is embedded within our collective liberation, right? No one is free until the most oppressed out of us are free. So I would say to be authentic in our lesbianism, in our queerness, and in our initial mission is to make sure that we are not, we resist normalization and normalization in our community organizations. Then that's how we become institutionalized, when we fear our oppressors.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Before we move on, and I'm not going to ask everyone to talk on that subject, I would like to ask Angela, and this is a little self-serving question. I know that you are working on a Curve Magazine archive project. Do you want to just take a second and tell everyone a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I believe it's in July we're going to unveil the Curve magazine history. We have the Curve magazine collection, the whole history of the magazine in the June Mazer Lesbian Archives. And we've had a couple archivists working for months on a online exhibit on Scalar, which is a really beautiful platform to put an exhibit. And it's really goes from the beginnings. The stories are amazing about Curve magazine. I mean, really fascinating information that even involves Barbara Greer, which I was shocked by when I learned about it, because it was a magazine that actually the publisher, Franco, and others really cared about lesbian history and cared about who those people were in lesbian history and learned about them when starting the magazine. So anyway, I hope you will all look for that in July. It's a fantastic exhibit and I know you'll love it.
Just a little bit, we'll be doing a gathering archival exhibit in Houston in the fall. So if you're interested in coming to that, where you can bring your Curve magazines or other items for inclusion in archives, you can sign up for the Curve magazine newsletter on our website. And I want to fire off some of these questions from the gallery. I see Margie from LC. Hello. She asked this question: how do you decide what to keep and what to throw out? Erin, what do you decide to keep and what do you decide to throw out?
Well, we're trying to So at Gerber Hart, we've had a lot of different people kind of in the deciding capacity of what we take and what we don't. And I think we're in a point right now where we're reevaluating some of the things that have been taken on simply because we have so much, and we've been in this space for a little over a decade, and we only have 2 archival spaces, and they're very full. So just making sure that everything we have in our collection is true to our scope, which is LGBTQ materials from the Midwestern United States, which is quite a few states. We try not to throw things away as much as possible. We have shared things with other LGBTQ archives and libraries in the Midwest. And we've also shipped things over to One Archives, and I think we might have even shared some things with Lesbian History Archives over the years too. And then we also take in books. Those are all the stacks you can see behind me. And we take in both LGBTQ fiction and nonfiction, and also straight materials. And we obviously anything that's straight, and then anything that we already have in our stacks, we either sell at a book sale or we give to like Open Books, which is another nonprofit here in Chicago that has a bookstore and also sends books to local schools.
I was just going to say we have only recently created deaccessioning policies, which is what do you get rid of that doesn't seem to fit maybe in the archives. And it's been a really hard decision a lot of the time. We're still getting better at it all the time, because grassroots archives run out of space or they run out of funding on a regular basis. So we really do have to decide those things. At some point, we were completely full of books, and we couldn't fit anything in a whole room that just had books. And we don't want to get rid of books. We don't want to get rid of any books, but we have to get rid of some books so that we can still collect really unique, rare, personal collections, and and have the space to fit those.
Right. When we started the Lesbian History Archives, we said we wanted everything. And remember, this was 1974. I just want to say our next big move is going to eventually have to have another building because we have outgrown our building. But the point I want to make is the only thing we have thrown away are things some women send us their menstrual blood. That doesn't keep well. Locks of hair. But what we do is we have sales, like all our overflow of books eventually try to return back to the community. And with international archives, there are always places you can move things, but that's not to say. And there's wonderful questions coming in, and I hope they can be for a later time. I mean, I would like to talk to everyone who's written them and try to answer, but space and money and will always be an issue. In some way, the archives, I'll say, I sometimes talk of us as an artifact. We are our own artifact now. Our building, that we have this building, and Erin has talked about it, and these are refuge. They are learning. They are places people fall in love. They are places where people find long lost members of their family. And it's too small, but it has to be that artifact that in the 1970s, how did a police, and I come for a police time where I could be arrested for dancing breast to breast, hip to hip with another woman. So to recreate the space where you walk through a door, and that physical taking into, it's like a portal that leads to your own past, and then you create the future with that knowledge. But we will never be as big as we need to be. So you out there, everyone, the young ones, everyone, do what we did was Something needed to be done. We didn't have the money. We didn't have humidity control. People say, you can't have an archives in your home. For 20 years, LHA lived in my apartment and grew and grew and grew. You can do this. In the region, start your own archives. Get your groups together. All you need is a room and living voices and wanting hearts. Share every resource you have. Money is made in a capitalist society to be the only resource. It isn't, but I'm not saying it's, if you don't have a place to live, you know what, it's all these realities, but what we're representing here, we now know, is just one moment, one slice in the evolutionary life of this movement. And those who are listening, who are under, I'm 83, it's in your hands now. It's in your hands now.
Wow, how incredible to hear you talk. I want to just quickly ask, I could really read all these questions. I wish we had the time, but I wanted to ask, what advice do you have for younger dykes who are coming to realize that our present lives within the context of fighting occupation, living through the pandemic, etc., are worth documenting and archiving? How can we best preserve aspects of our lives and culture in this digital age? Anyone want to jump in for that?
I
I think
guess.
the speaking it out loud is good, that things are changing, and archiving digital material is very different than, collecting printed materials. It's very different.
I can talk about
And
this if that's like a thing.
yeah, I see you come off.
Yeah, I can answer this question. I mean, I feel like digital archiving isn't that far behind. I feel like there's this idea that we're just like losing everything, but I feel like we really aren't. There's only like some types of digital media, like digital records, that are hard to archive at this point in time. I would say like social media archiving is a bit ephemeral for us right now, because it's really hard to capture social media on like do like web crawls or web archiving. So I would say if you feel concerned about things that you are producing, analog storage is always an easy way to go if you don't have access to like large cloud storage. But I would say Dropbox is a way to do like free cloud storage. You can get like 1 terabyte, which is like more than your whole life's work of digital materials. Just like have a really uniform file naming pattern and stick with it. I would say if you're concerned about cloud storage for privacy concerns, you can use Proton Drive, which is annoying, but you can use Proton for like encrypted storage, or Nextcloud if you're doing like if you're archiving current activism. I always will for ongoing efforts to use Proton or Nextcloud if you want to host a server, or buy an external hard drive for like $15 and then put everything on the external drive, because most of the records that you're going to be producing are pretty stable. Like they're not going to like they're pretty lossless, right? And so you can download them to an external drive and put them on Proton or Nextcloud for encrypted storage. That's my answer. You'll be fine. Social media archiving, I would say if you're making flyers, save them. Save the like whatever platform you've been saving those flyers, save those as like TIFFs. Or if they're too big, save those as PDFs and then put them in your cloud or analog storage.
Oh, could I just say one more thing about it? Because Olivia just said intergenerationality. That's what's at the heart. I don't know half the things that Olivia just said. I don't know what they are. And that's why it's time for me to go and it's time for her to come. And no. This is how it is. This is how it is. And so yes. Oh, look, and Amanda, you'll bring us into the new world.
I was just going to say something really quick. I think a really important thing to do is fight the phobias and fight sexism, because those are the things that are making young people think they're not important or they're not important enough. And doing anything you can to help build your self-esteem. And these archives really validate people and help build self-esteem, and educate yourself on history of people like you. so that you can feel empowered and you know that your life is important and your history is important.
Yes, and with that, I must say, we are at time. This conversation went way too quickly. I want all the panelists to drop either their URLs or a contact information, if they're comfortable, into the chat. I know we didn't get a chance to answer enough questions to spend enough time with any of you. Thank you all so much for participating today, for coming out. I want to remind you that this Beyond the Rainbow panel discussion is a project of the Curve Foundation, and we're the only national nonprofit focused on LGBTQ plus women and non-binary people's story and culture. So please support us by visiting thecurvefoundation.org. Also, archives need money and resources in order to operate. Fund them if you're able. And I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day, and we'll see you at the next Beyond the Rainbow panel. Thank you from all of us at the Curve Foundation.
Thank you so much.